Hello, everyone. It's 6 o'clock, and let's get started. It's really gratifying to see everyone here this evening. There is a management committee meeting that will follow after this, so we're going to try to adhere to pretty closely to a 1-hour meeting in respect for them that they're not here, because I don't believe any of them brought their pajamas tonight. So we'll try to get started. Start with just a few common or sort of introductory thoughts. Obviously, you've all seen the letter that we wrote last week. We tried to identify the issues that face us. Number one, most importantly, is that the management committee is required by our code to submit a budget to the board that is balanced. Is it going through? Okay. Just want to make sure, because I'm assuming there's some folks watching outside as well. And I'm often criticized for not either speaking into the microphone or loud enough, so we'll try to do that. But anyway, so that's what we did. We went through a process where the management committee, over a period of weeks, looked at where we were financially, the challenges ahead of us, and they basically came up with a recommendation that we needed to take some cuts in the way we were living. As you know, we've proposed assessment increases each of the last 2 years. We attempted to get the information out to the community. Several of us spent a number of weekend days here in the lodge, here in the great room, making presentations about what we needed and what we didn't. Unfortunately, I think we all are convinced that we either needed additional revenue or we needed to change the way we were doing business. And since we failed in getting additional revenue, we had to, or we were forced to find a new way to do business. Like I said, the management committee spent a few weeks on this. They looked at it. They looked at many scenarios. I was there for some of the meetings. Randy certainly was, and others were as well. We needed to find ways to pay for some of our most important services. We have a very simple budget, folks. We have essentially 800 assessments here. Each house pays around roughly $2,000. It's $1.6 million. Our payroll budget is nearly $1.2 million by the time we do it. Our business is fairly simple. We have 3 people here in the office, Randy, Penny, and Christina. We have 8 full-time security guards. We try to have 2 people on at all times, so that's one person having one person on is 168 hours. We have 2, so we have with 8 people. We cover we need 336 hours of employees. We have 8 full-time people. 8 times 40 is 320. We make up the difference with some part-timers. If we're committed to the 2 people on board 7 hours or 7 days a week, 24, that's minimally what you got to do. We need a couple additional people to work in the summer, because we try to have somebody out on the lake, and we also need to cover vacation and sick leave. And so that's what we do. It's a very simple calculation. Similarly, we have 1 manager of maintenance, and we have 6 other staff members. And they're charged with all 36 miles of our roads. They're charged with taking care of the golf course, the swimming pool, the tennis courts, anything you need. That's our staff. The only other piece that we have is upstairs. I'm sorry. We do hire a couple guys during the summer who come, and they primarily, 80% of their time is spent cutting grass at the golf course. So that's what we've got, folks. Costs us about $140,000 for insurance and real estate taxes. It's not a very complex budget. It's simple, but it is what we've committed to and what we've been doing here in the hills for the 10 years that I've been doing this stuff.
Check to see if we're on your phone.
Hang on just a second. Okay. We're just checking to make sure that it's being televised out properly. So that's where we're at. And a couple of the problems that happened this year, the last 5 years has seen a huge erosion in the amount of business upstairs in the lodge. I've spoken to this. We've had a food services committee. Hartley Corson, who's here in the front, was the head of the committee for several years. We brought other people in. We've tried different things. We've tried different options. I think we're all pulling our hair out with that. Unfortunately, we just got the report in, and this year, from January through December 2019, we show a deficit upstairs in the food service of a subsidy. It's not a deficit. It's a subsidy of $197,000. 4 years ago, that was about $60,000. The amount of business, in the year that we had the fire here, we had more business in the lodge than we did this year. And we were closed for 4 months. That capitalizes a lot of our problem right there. The other thing is the clubhouse has gone from last year of basically breaking even. This year it was down $29,000 in deficit. So you can look at that as being a huge source of our problem. We have in our budget, we attempt every year to fund, one of the main challenges we have is to put enough money into our reserves that are not reserves. They're essentially investments in our club. And one is the depreciation and one is the capital fund. The capital fund, our guideline has been to put 5% a year, 5% of our normal assessments. 5% of $1.6 million is $80,000. That's what we've attempted to put in there. We calculated, I think 8 years ago, we have a depreciation schedule of equipment and material that we need to replace. And 8 or 9 years ago, that number we needed to put into that fund was approximately $130,000. So what's happened this year with the other issues, with a lack of an assessment increase, with only 1% and average, less than 2% over the last several years, and the cost and the inflation that's hit us, we've now reached the point where this year we were not able to fund our reserves adequately. The long-term issue is fairly substantial, which means when the next dump truck fails, we will not be able to replace it. We can sustain in the way we're operating, but we won't be able to pay for those. I don't think we can sustain this level of subsidy for the restaurant upstairs. It kills me. My wife and I come at least twice a week here, and often we get pizzas. I did not advocate when Jim and the management committee came forward and said they wanted to close, or we needed to look at suspending, not closing, but suspending operations in the lodge. I was completely against it. I said, we've got to find a new way. The problem is the issues have become very substantial. Okay, that comes to us to remediations, and how do we get there? One of the first things that I heard was, let's do an emergency assessment increase for people. We can't do one. We have a code. We have to follow the code. Anything that's mentioned in the code requires an amendment to the code. An amendment to the code requires a 2/3 vote, and it has to be voted on by the board at least 3 months before the election can be held. So if we decided to do an emergency one at the next board meeting, the soonest we could vote on it would be May. So we're not making this stuff out of whole air. We really are trying to deal with this and go forward with it. So then we looked at ways to do it. So one of the first things that we could do, given what numbers I've just told you, a $220,000 subsidy for the food services, was to look at how to reconfigure that and reduce that subsidy, try to be creative and do it, and we didn't take that decision lightly. There was the board. I don't think there was a person there who wanted to close the food services. I think everyone wants to figure out a way to do it. As we said in the letter that we wrote to you, it's more than just a restaurant. It's the main street. It's the meeting place. It's a place where you can bring your family when they come visit and everything else. So that's that. The other piece is that wasn't going to get us far enough, folks. We would not, by doing that and reducing that, we could not meet the goals that we had included in our in the goals of going forward. We needed to do more. And so that's why we decided the only other two big places, we can't fire the people in the office because somebody's got to collect the money and pay the bills. And I think we've got that run about as bare bone as you can do. If you can run this place with less than 3 people, then you're smart. You're way smarter than I am. So that's the first piece. So the second piece is to reduce our security. We've taken more on in security in the last year because we're handling, what'd you say, 1,500 packages a month? 1,500 packages a month. We tried to do that with the existing staff. That requires three or four different companies coming in, our people recording them, putting them in the back, calling you maybe multiple times to get it all done. It's an ongoing operation. We had to add staff certainly during the winter time to be able to handle that. That was not something that was ever in our budget previously. It's an additional thing that we took on. And the other piece is we wanted to also look at maintenance, and so we will not hire the seasonal people back, which means that to be able to maintain the golf course to a reasonable level, we will need to take some of our regular people who normally are working on fixing culverts and ditches, and they will now be working on cutting the grass at the golf course at some level. Probably not, we won't sustain it at the same level that we were. So those are the issues in front of us. Somebody sent a questionnaire into us and said, how did we get here? I mean, that's it. We haven't had enough increases in revenue, and we've got increased costs, and they're focused on those particular areas. Plus, we also faced, and Jim Kirk can speak to this in just a minute, I'm about done, and I'm sure you're getting tired of hearing me. But anyway, we have faced a compensation issue with many of our employees, is that as we've gone into more of a full-service economy, we were just losing people because we were underpaying them. Our security guards were making less than you would be making at Walmart or anywhere else. And so, as lovely as we all are, that people weren't willing to make that contribution to us to work here. So that was one of the first things. So that's been an issue with us. So we've got the additional costs, we've had reduced revenues, and then we've had to add on additional things that people have asked for. What do we consider to be the highest priority funding requirements that are not adequately funded? Obviously, we got to get the food service shaped. We've asked several experts in the field to work with us on that. They've committed to that. We're going to keep working with it. The other thing is, as I said earlier, we aren't funding our reserves. If something happens, if things break down, we don't have the money. We just don't. We haven't been able to we budgeted that money, but because of the shortfalls in other areas, we've not been able to. Now, we're not required by law to do it. This is a budget. But it's also a good decision to putting 200,000 plus into our investment reserves is only smart. It could be more than that if we had the additional funds. Have the cuts that just occurred put the club on a firm financial foundation, especially in the assessment increase does not pass? I think yes. So again, I'll let Jim talk to that in just a minute. That is our intent here. What projects are in flight that will be impacted by the budget deficit? Essentially not any that I can think of offhand, because we haven't been doing it. We haven't been stretching anything out. So these are the cuts we have. We've taken a whack at the food services. We've got to come up with that. I think I'm absolutely committed to that, unless the community tells me I'm wrong. Personally, I am.
Can I add some color commentary?
Absolutely.
Running. I would say that I would argue we're not. And the reason I say that is because you already alluded to the fact that we're not going to be able to probably work on our roads as much because we don't have as many people, and we already know that our roads are in bad shape. So I would argue that it's just getting us to barely keeping our head above water.
I agree. That was what I was going to say. Anna was going to add, and we can get into this more, but all of our amenities cost money. We could have just as easily closed the clubhouse and the golf course, but getting the golf course back up and running, unlike the lodge, would take hundreds of thousands of dollars to get those greens repaired. So that's why it was the lodge. But it all costs. Everything that we have comes with a cost. There's no free lunch.
Mr. Kirk.
The two pieces of this, there's two pieces, two times when the slide started. One was the fire, which he mentioned earlier. That year, the profit and loss, or the cost, however you want to look at it, for upstairs looked a lot better. Part of that was because we got some money from the insurance company for being closed for loss of business. But before that, a couple of years, there was a period of time under a prior GM upstairs where the loss was, for a couple of years in a row, consistently in that $56,000 to $70,000 loss. subsidy range. We've been told by a million different experts that that's not ever going to make money. So it's gonna always have somewhat of a subsidy. So the traffic upstairs started declining after the fire, and it continued to the point where we lost 197,000 or whatever he said. The other piece of it was the amenities fund, or the capital fund, depreciation fund, roads fund, employee insurance fund. All of those have been not fully funded ever since the dam broke. There was about $300,000 worth of initial expense of engineering and everything else that had to go on, that they had to take the money out of, not employee fund, but out of capital and depreciation to pay those initial costs. There's been an attempt ever since then, that's what, 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, to catch up. 2018, we made a little bit of progress, late 17, early 18, and since then, at the end of every month, after all the bills are paid and the payroll is paid, there's not enough left to fund these. He mentioned dump trucks. We have a depreciation schedule, an equipment replacement schedule that's I don't know, probably goes out 10 years, and
It's on the website.
it's on the website, and we look at it once every couple of months anyways, and there'll be stuff listed for 2020 that really needs to be replaced. Those of you that have to do with anything to do with equipment in factories, plants, whatever, you know that stuff wears out and you got to replace it. We keep moving it out and out and out, and we get to the point where it can't be repaired, and we're not going to put our guys in unsafe equipment. That we're just not, management committee, there isn't anybody on that committee that would authorize that.
Or the board.
Or the board, for that matter. It wouldn't get to the board.
That's true, that's
You know,
true.
it wouldn't get past him. But that's the two pieces, the biggest pieces of this. Those funds need to be brought back up to a level. Let me give you one more example. This is kind of a small one, but we are self-funded for medical insurance up to $10,000. So if, somebody gets the flu and goes to the hospital and they decide to do an EKG to make sure they're not in AFib at the same time or whatever all goes on, and that bill comes in, it comes in here and we pay it. And the goal is to keep that fund at about $25,000 to $30,000, so that if we get multiple hits, we got how many employees on the medical? 21 employees. We could have a situation where if medical maladies all hit everybody at the same time, we would not have a fund to pay for it. That's just some of the things that we sat down, the management committee with Randy, and normally Jim, once or twice Linda filled in for him while he was out playing grandpa in California, and we talked through these, and these people can attest to the fact that the closing upstairs was that was our last resort. We looked at everything else under the sun. We kind of kidded around that we started on plan A and we went through the whole alphabet and we were on plan Z before we finally got one that the numbers lined up right. And that's, and to the employee issue, last summer, the payroll issue, last summer we needed to hire a couple guards. He started doing some investigating. We were starting people out at $10.50 an hour. And even out here in the middle of nowhere, between Lancaster and Logan, let me see, McDonald's in Lancaster pays more than that, Walmart pays more than that, Walmart in Logan probably pays more than that. We had to raise our game to 11 just as a starting wage, and that's not, we don't have people running up to the door asking us for jobs at $11 an hour. would, it is not built into this budget to all of a sudden take care of everybody and get them up to a living wage. It's not there. This, in fact, there's very little merit increase money in this budget for the existing employees. We did look, as Linda said, at possibly the only other amenity that cost or subsidy is somewhere around $200,000. It would be the clubhouse and the golf course together. And if you shut down a golf course, those of you that know anything about grass, that's not regular grass on those greens. You'll lose it in 2 months. And their normal greens are, I don't know, $10,000 a piece to try to bring them back. So that really wasn't an option. There's history in Hideaway Hills of closing the Lodge restaurant, and that's why I presented to the board, it's a temporary closing, and I think he put it in his announcement. There's history. It's been done before. It's been done as recently as 15 years ago-ish. We can't go back and look at the numbers because they changed, they actually computerized stuff here within the last 15 years. And, I guess there's file drawers we could go look in. So we actually called a couple people that have been here since Pluto was a pup or before and found out, yes, it was closed for a while within the last 15 years, like almost a year, and it came back. And actually when it came back, it was a couple years later that we had its golden era, if you want to call it that, where it only lost $55,000, $60,000. If you go back to the 90s, everybody remembers Blueberry Hill. Everybody that's been here a long time. Blueberry Hill closed, and it took, somebody told me, almost 2 years before they got it opened back up as a Hideaway Hills operation. So we can mothball the equipment upstairs. That process will start next Monday morning, and shut it down and come back with probably a little bit different look. And the budget is written that we cannot take any loss from upstairs for 2020 or we blow the budget. So my guess would be it'll be after the first of the year when we'll come back, here's our, grand opening with our new menu and our new this and everything else. It was asked of management committee, it was asked of me at the board meeting, would we look at other options of opening it up, as early as a few months from now under a little bit different type of restaurant? And I told them we would look at anything. We'll look at everything. It just has to be kind of revenue neutral if we open it up before this year's budget runs through.
Anybody else want to speak?
Well, that's taking into account that we have an appropriate assessment increase, reopening it.
Potentially, yeah.
No assessment increase, no reopening.
We can't, the way this budget's written, it'll still take us 3 years to bring those funds that have already been mentioned, I'm not gonna run through them all again, back up to where they need to be, almost 3 years. So if we opened it up next April and it all of a sudden started losing $130,000 again, then we'd be right back to where we are. We'd be sitting here like we are right now. With the input from the Food Services Committee, which is loaded with people with a ton of food services experience, I think that we can put together a restaurant that will not lose near this much money. It won't be subsidized. I gotta learn to start using that word. It won't cost us this much. It'll still cost, 50, 60, 70, something like that.
I mean, at this point, we're providing an amenity that the membership has chosen not to invest in. I mean, we're down to 300,000, we had a 500,000, the costs are up a little higher in the food, the costs are up this year a bit in the food services from previous years. But the killer is that the revenue has dropped. You know, again, we've gone from 450 and those type of ranges to now we were under 300,000 this year. So, I mean, it kills me because like I said, I love to go there. I enjoy it. I enjoy meeting friends, acquaintances. This was not an easy decision for me at any level. You could almost always see me there my wife and I there on a Wednesday night and then one of the weekend nights. We try to get there all the time. But other people aren't. I mean, it just is, that's what it is. And so I think the community has to tell us, what do they want? It doesn't make any sense to provide you something that you don't want or invest in it that heavily. $200,000, folks, is nearly 10% of it is 10% of our actual operating assessment. Because the operating assessment is $1.6 million. 800 people times 800 families or assessments times 2,000 a year. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. It's not physics. It's just simple arithmetic. And so, I mean, that's where it is. I think nobody else got anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. Everybody up here is volunteering, and there's no secret agendas up here. And, you know, if you don't have enough money, if you look at it as your own household budget, and, you know, you don't have the money, you gotta cut some. And, you know, what really scares me is the economy's strong. I mean, we hit something like 2007, 2008, and, you know, we're gonna be in real trouble. So, welcome all the comments and that, and I think if everybody's civil and works together, you know, we'll figure it out.
My worry with continuing in the way that we are is that we're just kind of bumping along. With this budget, we're bumping along, and one bad thing happens, and we're gonna go bumping right into a pit. So this is not the end-all, be-all. It's not where we need to be. And I know that we all agree with that, but I think we need to communicate that. And I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, but we're not in the best shape we're not in the shape we need to be
Absolutely.
financially.
And
We're not healthy.
And another question I'll speak to just shortly or quickly is this idea of user fees and generating a lot of user fees. If you go to the website and you go to the rules of the club, one of the things is called deed restrictions. And one of the parts in the deed restrictions, which is the covenant that creates the club and basically cannot be overturned, says the people who own lots will be charged a fee for their lots and that the benefits from those fees will be equitably distributed. The attorneys have basically identified to us that if it's something we're providing for the club, basically for all of the club, that it is not eligible for a user fee. Okay, you match that with the code requiring amendments to anything that's in the code. If you want to change it, you have to have an amendment. An amendment requires 66 2/3. Now we could change the 66 2/3, but guess what it takes to change the 66 2/3? It takes 66 2/3. Okay, so having a whole hodgepodge of user fees that we would do, you know, doc fees here, doc fees there, and everything else, it isn't allowable under our code. I mean, I appreciate a lot of the ideas and thoughts that have gone into that. Now, you know, we've talked about other things where there's a fee for the lodge and stuff, and again, we can visit with those. But there are a few things, a few ground rules, or a few constraints that we live in that we just have to do. The club was set up to charge an assessment to everybody, and that the people would benefit equitably from that. Look it up. I'm not making it up. 0.7 under your deed restrictions. Go to the website. It's right there.
It's right.
0.8. I'm sorry. I'm lying. But anyway, it's there. And we've asked that question because we asked it here just recently in regards to another operation. So that's there, and the code is what it is. There's 20-some pages of the code. It has things from fairly high level to fairly arcane things in it. Rules, the board can change. So the rules we can do, and that's a 50% vote of the board. or somebody can bring something up at the annual meeting, and if it's a rule, we can vote on it there and 50% of the people vote for it. But if you're changing the assessments and those sorts of pieces, written in the code requires 66 and 2/3.
One more thing, management committee spent more than a couple meetings. We spent a couple of months actually kind of working on this, and we just got done with that. And now, what we get to work on, and, you know, I'll address the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Yes, we are gonna go to the board with what we feel is the assessment increase that needs to be presented. And it will probably be at this next board meeting so that it can be a special vote in May, so that we can address some of these issues quicker than 3 years, and that's where we're at. So that's, the other guys on the management committee know that. I'm not telling them anything that didn't come as a surprise, but that's just more fun that we get to have.
Oh, I want to go back to the user fees a minute. Help me out here. My understanding of the deed restriction, number 8, is where we pay one assessment for all the amenities. It's my understanding to change that deed restriction, we would have to have a vote, and it would need to be 100% to change the deed restriction, which is different than an overall assessment increase, which is 2/3 vote.
That is what Rick Levinsky told me.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, that is my understanding.
And getting 100% would be impossible, because you'd have to get the people who you can't get to anymore.
Derek Jeter couldn't even get in the Hall of Fame.
There you go.
All right, let's take a few questions from people.
I have a question. All right, you keep saying food service,
Why
but
don't
you
you go
don't.
up to the microphone, please, because you're.
I'm loud enough, you know that.
I don't,
Okay.
yeah, I'm thinking of the people at home, Cynthia.
All right,
Okay.
so you keep mentioning food service, but you don't say bar. Does that also include the bars and the
Yes,
lodge?
it's
Okay,
closed.
so it closes everything down.
Yes.
All right, now, you said you cannot reduce the office staff down to 2. What are their jobs there? Is there a job description posted? Can a volunteer take over one of those so that we can put our guard back on? But I think our security is more important than something that could be done by a volunteer in the office. Is there a way of, and I know Jim and I've covered this about the packages, a lot of questions here, but about the packages, I know a volunteer can't do that. But if we can't relieve one of the staff members in the office, can they do that? Because you could cover them by the HIPAA.
Actually, I got an email asking about
Uh-huh.
staff in the office, and that third person was added in about 2007, 2008. And there has been so many tasks added to that office staff in that 12 to 13 years that other than answering volunteers can answer the phones, and when we were down somebody, quite a few people did volunteer and came in, but basically what they did was answer the phones. If somebody came in and wanted to make a payment, Penny had to run up there and do it.
Why? Why can't somebody be trained? I mean, I run a
Oh,
community.
I understand
So-
that.
Randy, how long does it take when you get the second level clerical? How long does it take for them to be able to operate on their own?
Christina's been here for a year and still learning how to do the job.
The jobs are not easy. I mean, when you deal with these people and the questions that are thrown at them, they're not easy jobs. They're high-level clerical jobs.
They administer the docks, they administer the boat stickers, they do all of that.
To me, that seems all very elementary.
Well, that's fine.
Okay, I mean, no, it does. Mr. Patterson, please do not laugh at me. Okay?
Well,
No, but it does seem
you
very
said
elementary.
something that was funny. I'm
Well,
sorry.
I'm sorry that you
Okay.
felt that way, but.
You
but it's
don't
not.
know what the jobs are. You're asking for a job description, that's fine.
Right, I would like to see
But
one.
until you see them, I don't think you can say you can do it.
We can evaluate, I mean, everything's on the table.
Yeah,
Cynthia.
but I just
mean,
think-
and that
I
was
just
not,
think
that was not one thing, that was not a choice that we took.
I-
One other thing
And I
regarding
understand
security.
that, I understand that. I just think that our security is more, that other things could possibly be handled. And that's my feeling on it. So, but I am
Appreciate
for, I am for the assessment increase, I always have been. So, we'll see what happens.
Yep.
Anyway, those are my
Cynthia, I
questions.
agree with you on security, and there are 7 board and management committee members who have volunteered to be on call between 10 PM and 6 AM, so the gate is not left open.
That's good.
And Randy's working out the schedule, and what we need to do, because we too are worried about the security.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Mr. Patterson.
John, Lefevre.
Well, I had an idea before I came over, but it changed when I heard how bad things really are, because it's not an idea that would fix things. But this idea might help with the guard situation, and I'll just leave it here. I mean, we can't really argue it out here, but what I was thinking was to save the guards. Say for 2 guards, you're paying them $11, $12 an hour, right? That's 25 grand a year. Let's say fully loaded, it's say 30 grand a year. So $60,000 for 2 guards. What I would suggest to think about, just an idea, and we don't need to argue it out here, but the people that voted yes for the assessment the last time, if you sent them a note and said, hey, here's the new Save a Guard program, if you will pledge the assessment increase for 12 months, which would buy you time now before you have a vote in May or whatever, but pledge it for 12 months, even if you got, 300 or 400 folks that would do the $20 a month, that would more than cover the 2 guards. And so I'll just leave this here as something to look at. It would be like a donation, but a few people on Facebook, I put it on Facebook just as a crazy idea, but there's a lot of folks here that, particularly with the guard situation, because it's a pretty clear number, say 60 grand a year or whatever for the 2 guards. I would donate, I bet you a lot of folks would donate to keep the security up, at least as a stopgap Band-Aid until we get a vote into and pass an assessment increase. So I just wrote that out. Again, you can look at it, but
Thanks,
this is
John.
a thought.
Appreciate it. We were looking for creative ideas, that's for sure.
I just have one question, and you might have covered it. I came in a minute late and was already going. If you're closing the dining room and the food service, what happens to the brewery?
Nothing. It stays open. It's still producing beer.
It's still producing beer, and we can still keep our license
Yes.
because we're still selling the beer at the clubhouse.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Because we worked real hard to get that brewery.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Yeah, we're not gonna threaten that. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of the brewery, have
Could
we
you
ever
come
been-
up front, please, a little bit? I hate to do that to you, but it's, I can't even see in the back.
Have we ever considered like expanding what we brew? Like people that are really into craft beer like to have more than just, a pale ale and a lager. And we could bring in more people, to the restaurant when it opens back up. Talking Hills is a tourist area. People that like craft beer will seek out breweries.
Can I take it?
We would have to change some of the parameters and possibly expand the equipment to be able to cycle through. As you noted before, we ran out of beer. So it possibly could work, but we also have a third, we have a limitation on how many kegs we can operate currently. All things can be rectified with some money, but
There's a
honestly,
maximum that we're allowed to brew.
no,
No, we just need,
we don't have the
Wait.
tank sizes and
okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that if you guys don't know who our brewer is, he's been brewing the beer here for years, and we actually don't have a succession plan for him, so.
Jim, could you ask members to state their name?
Okay, yeah. Yeah,
What'd she say?
I said if you don't know who our brewer is, we only have one, and he's been doing it for years, and there's no successor at this point, so we have kind of an additional challenge there.
He's a member. He's been here forever. He started the brewery, and actually he's training his son
Oh, good.
to, and we had a meeting with him about a year ago
about
over some production issues, And he was supposed to be training his son so that he works full-time at another brewery in Westerville or somewhere, and couldn't get down here in a timely fashion every great once in a while. So we thought it was a great idea that he was training his son, and that'll give us a backup. It's not a true succession plan, but it's close.
Cabot, come on up though.
Do I really need to?
Yeah.
I have plenty of loud.
I think you're gonna, but we're broadcasting.
This is the broadcast?
Broadcasting.
We want you to, we want more hits on our YouTube.
I can't. Yeah, and this, it probably won't take long. So, obviously a lot of us talked about a dining minimum, but that violates this deed issue that would take 100% to change. Is that what that was? So the dining is off the table, the dining
No,
minimum?
that would be in the code. That could be an assessment.
And that would be a 66, just so I'm clear on this, because
Correct.
every place I've ever been has had, and it could be different amounts. It could be 25, it could be 40. Even that would fund this place.
We've talked about it several times.
Yes, and so that's still maybe something to be bandied about. But here's my other question.
Certainly is.
So if you come next week, Jim, and you come up with what you think the increase needs to be with the amenity fee, and then we get this ball rolling and you all vote, or more than 50% vote or whatever, and 3 months from now, there's a vote. And let's say it passes. How long after that passage of this new amenity increase would it be? Because I just got depressed when you said first of next year before this place reopens. Is it still, even if it passes? Because I don't know that would be a very attractive thing for voters, knowing it would still be closed for 6-7 months after passing the amenity increase. What can you address that? What can you say about that?
Well, I think it's probably a little early to answer that question right
Yeah.
now.
So
That was in the details. I
it
mean,
could reopen earlier than next
Yeah.
year if it passed. That's what I was getting.
Depends on the revenue coming in.
Right.
Is it enough to support the new restaurant?
Right. And that's what I was saying. You're going to come up with an amount you think is what we need, right, Jim, to kind of take care of
That's
this.
correct.
With quite a bit of input from a members advocacy group.
Right, which I think is great. I think that's awesome. I was just wondering if it all goes and it passes, it could open perhaps sooner than
Absolutely.
next spring.
It's
It's not necessarily a light switch though, because we have to put staff back into place. There would be training of new staff if they weren't previously here. The options of a new menu, new manager, that
Sure.
whole stuff taking place.
I
where
can see that
think
taking a while.
that would, I could see where maybe something could open steady by jerks, because we'd want to do some trial runs and things maybe, but full blown like it's been.
Well, there'd also be,
It'll
if
take
it
time.
passes in May, the first money wouldn't come in until,
It could be June 1 if you want.
well, probably July
You
1st.
put it in.
Yeah. I'm just saying that keeping that open, I think, would be a positive in promoting the amenity passage. That we're not going to still wait another 6, 7,
Just
8 months.
to correct, it's the assessment package, not the amenity package.
Okay, the assessment,
I just wanted to make
that's
sure.
what I meant. The assessment
For those watching at home.
For those, where is that camera, by the way?
Right behind you. It's showing your best side.
Just wondering timetable on that kind of thing. What are we talking about if it works?
It's a good question. It's a good question. Please.
I might be speaking, not understanding what was going on. I understand.
Could you identify who you are,
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry.
I don't know.
549.
Okay, thanks.
We're looking at spending 75,000 to update so we can receive packages and things. Is that at a post office or something? That was the expansion of the card shop.
That's not being considered.
No.
That died with the
That
last,
died?
that died,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, it died
It
because
could be in the next assessment.
we didn't get the money.
Yeah.
And then the other question I had was, you have, last assessment vote we had, the idea was to keep everything open at $60, eventually $60 a month.
Yes, sir.
But now, even if we do a $60 a month, we can't keep the restaurant open.
We didn't receive the money, so we don't have any knowledge of those funds coming in. Once the vote was no, we didn't have the money to project that budget.
I think
Okay,
if the
I'm sorry, I
if
was
the
under the
increase
impression-
comes, that will certainly, I mean, believe me, the
Okay, I was
board,
under the impression that the lodge was going to be closed even if we got the
No.
increase?
No.
No. If you,
It's what we need to open
The
it.
lodge is temporarily closing after this Saturday.
But it's not a,
and if you look
It's
at,
temporarily. If the assessment increase passes, then we'll open it up as fast as we can.
and the language in the letter that you saw was carefully worded to say we are suspending operations. We're not closing the lodge, we're suspending operations.
yeah,
Well, but I mean, that was intentionally that, because believe me, it was not an easy decision. I was hanging on to the very end to try to come up with other ideas. So
I just misunderstood how you guys.
yeah, no.
Cool.
The goal is to get it open again. You may.
Hello, my name's Paul Wooster. I'm a new member about 3 years ago. Nice to see everyone here supporting the Highway Hills. So my question has to do, I actually have a couple of questions. First thing is, we have the lodge that's closed, but we have special holidays coming up like Easter and Memorial Day before we could get things back running. We also have gift cards that we've sold in the past. We don't want to lose money on anything we're doing with the lodge, and so it has to be self-sustaining. But if you were able to say, set up special events for holidays or some other planned party that was put forward, and we're able to sell a number of gift cards to fund that special event, and it was, so in other words, it wasn't going to lose money, and have volunteers to obviously support the planning of selling the gift cards and doing the things to reach a certain minimum number to plan the event. Sort of like what they did for Thanksgiving or for Mother's Day. Could a series of events be planned in the lodge prior to when the vote is held or even after the vote is held, so that there is still an opportunity to use the lodge and have food and drink there?
I would, we would look at anything, but real quickly in my head, a Thanksgiving dinner or an Easter dinner or something like that, I don't believe we would be able to turn out a dinner with volunteers.
So I'm saying if you had, like say, you sold 100 gift cards, and you could say to a catering company or someone who's got staff to support that, and then you fund it yourself. I don't know if you could put this deal together or not. I'm just wondering if that possibility is worth pursuing.
That's something to look at.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, again, it's the whole idea is not to be punitive on this, believe me. I mean, I can't stress that. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's not that, but if you look at the numbers, I mean, people,
I'm not
I know.
I
But yeah, if we can, if you've got a plan and thought of catering it and having an event, go for it, please.
All right, so the second thing, I put this on Facebook, forgive me, is, we lost
I stopped reading Facebook. Not that I ever did much, but it was, all right, go ahead.
So we have the golf course, and we have a lot of people that enjoy the golf course over the course of the summer. And we've lost, I believe, 2 seasonal workers that were, going to be helping, with maintenance of the golf course. Not a lot happens to it,
I think you live on the golf course, right?
So the thought that crossed my mind is, you drive down the freeway now, and then you see this section of freeway is, sponsored by a particular person or adopted by a particular person. And I suspect that at least in terms of the border areas or things on the golf course, that people would be willing to divvy up different sections of the golf course, give it a map, whatever, and say, I'm gonna, adopt this section of the golf course or, sponsor this part of the golf course. I'd be willing to do that for the, I think it's the 7th grade of the 8th P. I'm not saying I'm willing to jump on the tractor and drive it down the middle of the fairway, during a.
Or we're happy to have you do that.
We're in Bulls now.
I think, Paul, the proper place to put that proposal is to the golf committee.
Okay.
And I think they would be very happy to listen to that as an opportunity. I mean, it's not a financial issue. It's a financial issue in the case of you doing things, but volunteerism and issues like that are that we generally ask the committees are the best place, because those are the people that live and care about them more than anybody else.
I think I'll add to that, the golf committee is gonna be talking about that.
Sure.
What can we do to, who's
Who's the acting chair?
that would be my wife.
Would you say that into the mic?
I can tell you that is something that we have, we are gonna put on the table for discussion is what can we do as volunteers to fill in for these seasonal people that aren't coming.
Yeah, that's great. Okay,
Nothing's
thank you.
been decided, but it's on the list.
So I've got one last newbie question, and I'm sorry I'm taking up so much time. Is that I noticed when the last assessment increase was proposed, and there was a kind of a wish list or an aspirational list of things we wanted to accomplish with that $60. And one of the things that was confusing to me as a new member, and there's probably a lot of history behind this, and I just want to understand it better, is that we have a kind of an operating expense, and that would be including of the amenities. We also have a capital improvements focus where we want to either add a building or buy a dump truck or a piece of equipment. And we have a roads focus. And so I'm wondering why, when we're proposing, assessment increases or things, we haven't allocated, a target for each of those things. Because as I understand it from reading things, is that we have a depreciation fund gap that we need to close. And so the story I would hope we'd be able to tell in a year or in 2 years is that this assessment increase or this road assessment increase improved the situation from X to Y, and continue to tell that story as time goes by. That seems to me when we just have one assessment, the money's all put together, people get confused when money gets moved around, and they think that, well, it's not being used for the intention I voted it for. And I don't think anybody's, I think, again, everybody is here to make this place better. I'm not questioning decisions they make. I'm just saying it sometimes gets lost in translation, I think, when the money moves from one place to the other. And I was new, I was confused, so.
Yeah. Well, I think, just to respond to that, I think it's, the explanation of the roads fund had been there before, and I think it was around 2011, there was an effort to increase it, I think, from $150 to $200. For exactly that reason. People wanted to know that there was an earmarked fund that was going, and originally the idea was to chip and seal everywhere all year. And then over time, we decided that we were going to do the moto pay. We were going to improve the main roads and made that a higher priority. Again, those funds went directly. Randy can show you where every dollar of that goes. Now, you raise a good budgeting question, which is, do you want more earmarks, more specific thing, and you want to ask people to do that? Or do you want to propose a generalized, budget increase, which is what we did, with the idea that there were deliverables that were within that.
Right.
That to me makes more sense because you then can be more agile. That doesn't take away from your responsibility to show people that you have used it for at least what you tried to at first. Now things happen, but when I took this job, I did not expect to have to go out and raise $3 million to fix the dam.
Right.
I did not include, we had built up those balances fairly substantially. So the dam fails, we take 2 years to get the ODNR to approve it. We knew what it was, we raised $3 million. In the meantime, all of those expenses getting there, we had to use those to get that project done because that was the highest priority. That would have not been on our original commitments and things we wanted to do. So that's, I did budgets for all my career. So how agile do you want to be? What are the deliverables and what do you want to, those are good questions, and it's incumbent upon us that I think, these guys, anything under 15,000, the management committee, after the budget approves, they spend on. Then beyond that, they work these questions really hard. They get down to the $70 and $80, much below my interest. I'm serious, but that's what they do.
So let me just leave this last perspective is that I think a lot of people have evaluated school bond issues, for instance, or operating budgets. And I think we're kind of facing a similar dynamic here as it relates to getting our capital funds back where they need to be in our depreciation.
Right.
So if you have a school levy and you're improving a building, and once that is done, that levy goes away or it's renewed. So that's why I'm saying that I think that kind of process may help us here in differentiating the two.
I think we're open, Paul, to that.
Yeah, so just offering that as a suggestion, because I think that if people saw that, look, I want to get that depreciation fund and those building things fixed, but I don't want to have that perpetually in my budget or cost, because once it's done, it's done. But I understand that there's operating expense for people, employees, and other things that are separate, that are recurring. I don't know, it's a take, and I thought a lot of people are used to dealing with school type issues. Maybe that would work here.
Okay. Well, again, I can't we're not talking about big dollars here. The capital fund is an $80,000 budget a year, 5% of our operating budget. The canonical $128,000 we generated 10 years ago is what we're putting into depreciation. That's in our budget. Before we took these cuts, we were not going to get any of that this year. So that's the plan, is to get that back in the budget. That is clearly so going forward, where do we split any increases? That is incumbent upon us to share that with the membership. What we're going to use it for and whether we can keep to it.
Well, again, I'm sorry, people, so when we add in there like building a new maintenance building or building a new dump truck or putting an irrigation system into the golf course, those all seem like capital improvements to me. Things that would be done, one and done, and there's a separate need to have people to mow the grass and put fertilizer down.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm trying to
You're right.
distinguish.
Okay. Yep, we're good.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Joe?
Real quick, guys. Joe Williams. Would it be possible to keep the bar open? The alcohol sales, everybody knows you make money on alcohol sales. You don't pay bartenders very much. Would it be possible to keep that bar open so people can bring food in? I'm sure there's a couple bartenders that would love to stay. And I think people know how important it is to visit there now.
Do you know what?
I just got my job back, guys. That's quick, that's all I got.
Okay.
Is it possible?
It's not as normal.
Okay. Why?
Yeah, why?
Why? Because if somebody got to show me in a budget or an action plan where it's not gonna lose money.
$5 for a shot of alcohol, it's $30 for a bottle.
Okay.
I'll piggyback on here. I have a question that kind of piggybacks on what Mr. Williams was saying, and is it possible, or would you consider keeping the lodge open limited basis throughout the month of February to see, does anyone know, since your announcement, what the numbers are? I know patronage is up. I understand there's $18,000 on hold for a floor for the lodge kitchen, so that would offset the cost, obviously, of if it was reallocated in the operating expense of the lodge.
That's amenities money.
It is. We'd have to go back through the whole committee process to do that.
I don't think you can take it for operations anyways.
No, it's not, generally not.
I believe we have a question to the club attorney right now pending, and we should have an answer on that in about 2 days. But
Yes.
if that was an option where we could reallocate those funds, even keeping it open on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe use Brandon up at the clubhouse because there's going to be overflow there on the other nights that it's closed. Is that something that's going to be a consideration?
It's something we'd look at.
Okay. Anyone have the numbers since the announcement? As far as, are we breaking even? Deficit?
No, I actually,
In the last 10 days?
I don't think so. Not in the last 10 days. I don't know.
Okay. Anyone else? No?
I actually thought things were trending better. Was hoping to see that numbers in December looked better, and they didn't.
Okay. All right. And the items that are on the list for the budget, like the sprinkler for the golf course or the, just the other upgrades that are needed
For the assessment.
for the, that were, I guess, the RFID system, are those all on hold at this point now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything that was on the original $60 has been overtaken by events.
Will
And
the
so
fitness center continue progress?
that's to be determined. At this point, there's no operating funds for it at all.
Okay.
And I mean, that is a question that it's out there right now we're looking at. So I think, I mean, along with you, we're making this up, or not making this up, we're working on these one by one as we go through it. Hello.
Hello, I'm Lori Cook, and I'm also chair of the ACC, for those of you who haven't met me. It appears that sooner rather than later, we're going to have another proposal for an assessment increase, correct? Do we not?
Assuming the board approves it. No.
Right.
Yes, Lori.
So we've obviously got to this point because we have a 66 2/3 majority, supermajority, that's not working. Can we, at that same time, when we have this vote for the increase in assessment, also have a second vote to get rid of the 66 2/3 and have the simple majority rather than the supermajority, so that we don't get into the situation again? it appears that the minority is really ruling at this point than our majority.
Yes.
So I just kind of wanted to take a little poll to see if you guys would support having that second issue on the ballot to vote so that we can get rid of this 66 2/3. What do you guys feel? Can you each tell me what you feel like?
I'd like to know more about why we did that in the first place.
Yes?
There's a reason why we put that in place. I'd like to hear more about why we did that originally.
I want to know. Well,
Before we,
Susan Pyle could speak to that a little bit.
I think Richard is ready too.
Dave Harcum.
Dave Harcum was one of the original members here, and he thought that would be a very good idea to add to the code. And years later, he saw that sometimes the minority controlled the situation here. The minority does control it, and that's what we have now. And we're not getting our assessment increases because of that minority vote. And he came back and tried to, they put it on the ballot to get rid of 66 2/3, and it didn't hit the 66 2/3. It came close, but it didn't pass, and it's never been tried again. And I was here when that was voted on, and it's just a shame, because we wouldn't be here now under this situation. We would have had a couple of assessments under our belt and we'd healthy right now without that.
I guess my question is, what does it take to get it on the ballot for vote?
Okay, it's really very simple. The board would have to approve the language, and then we have to wait for 90 days to vote on it. That's all.
Right.
And the board only has to pass by a majority vote. So we
Okay.
need 5 votes on the board to be able to put that on.
So does it need to formally be presented to the board?
Oh, I think it'll be presented.
Okay, awesome, thanks.
We all agree.
Hey,
For a lot of us.
Lori, I would bet that if we're gonna have a vote in May on an assessment, that'll be on there too.
And I would think
Would make sense.
it would make sense that if you're gonna pass your assessment, you're gonna pass that as well.
Good.
That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. The previous 2 assessment attempts failed at the 66 2/3 mark. Did they pass if we were under a simple majority?
On the first one, we were only 8 votes short.
So we
And the
wouldn't-
second one, we had over
We
64%.
wouldn't be in this predicament.
64.5 to 35.5.
So, but I think it's important for people to understand why we have that, or why we had that, or because if we consider getting rid of it, what are we doing? And the reason that we had it was because there were a number of members, a great many members in the early days when there weren't a lot of people with just a lot here or there, but people who had a lot of lots, which entitled them to a lot of votes. And so in an effort to be more equitable, they put in that it wasn't just a simple majority, it was the 66 2/3 to try to balance things out. But now there are fewer people who have that many lots and get multiple votes. There are still some, a good many. Do you know how many?
Probably less than 20.
Okay.
Yeah, very few.
41. 41? 40. Ginger Reed says 41 people are getting multiple.
I asked Penny.
Okay.
Most of them have 4, and there's several that have 2 or 6 votes.
But if you look at what's happened is we've given these people, we've given some of our members, I have multiple lots, extra votes. And then we've said, yeah, but we're not going to count those as extra votes because we're going to do 66 2/3. So we try to create balance, but we shot ourselves in the foot. And so, like Lori, I was hoping that we would be able to talk about fixing the big problem, which is the 66 2/3, so that we're not constantly solving minutia and trying to scrape pennies together to go for something like that.
Thank you, I agree. I mean, I can't agree more. Okay, the last one, because we gotta move on to the major committee here.
Last one, wow. Ken Witt. This is going in a good direction, but we all have to, especially everybody that's here, have to make a commitment in the next 3 or 4 months to really work hard to get the vote out and make sure it passes. In the meantime, though, John had an idea that we could put voluntary contributions in to get the guards back up. What do we have to do to make that start? Because some of us have been talking about that since the last assessment increase was denied. And people are willing to put that money in. John will write his check for $240 tomorrow morning. Maybe he's got the money. What does it take to get started? I'll write my check tomorrow too. I mean, it's still, not that I'm rich, but I will do that, of course. And what do you have to do to get started on something like that?
It's we're on new territory. Let's take a look at it,
I
Ken.
got the idea written out there at the end of the table.
Yeah.
With pretty much protocol and ways you might be able to consider doing it. With a pledge,
take it, just.
committed, set up a PayPal account, we can all come, keep it separate, but there's a few ideas there maybe where it could be done. And send it to all 800 people, 800 resource payers, and say, hey, here's the deal. It's a Save a Guard program. You want to commit to 12 months, sign the pledge, blah, blah, blah.
So I love the idea. I actually had a similar idea, hoping we were gonna pass the last assessment, because we do have members here that are on fixed income, and I think we could do the same thing to help them.
Yes.
We don't have time for a couple more questions. We got all this going there.
I'll go, have two more. Okay, two more questions. Yeah, we got another meeting too.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bill Sherman, and I've been, I've read the H&H financials and the operating plans in real trouble. Trustees and management are starting to make some really tough decisions, Mr. Kirk, to restore financial responsibility to Hideaway Hills P&L statement. Any proposed assessment money that is approved by the H&H members, there will still be an operating shortfall in a few years from now because of unfortunately, the new deck and the wellness center are ongoing maintenance and operating expenses here at Hideaway Hills that are going to be added on among everything else. I would like to propose the change to the Code of Regulations to the following. The new membership fee monies being given to the amenities fund will change from the current 50% to the new percentage of 25% to help the depleted Hideaway Hills Club operating fund. That would be considered possibly. If the Hideaway Hills membership would pass this proposed change, the Hideaway Hills operating fund would have an additional approximately $71,000 in 2019 to spend on other things. So just wanted to know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eric, Boy Scout, real quick. Thank you guys. I know it's not easy. It's a thankless job. Disappointing anytime we lose any amenity. I don't care if it's tennis, which I've never played, this court, many of the others. I think we start setting the same down. So, real quick, and I think I know the answer to this. I'm going to ask everybody behind me if the vote was today for amenity increase by a show of hands, would you vote for it? Assessment. Thank you. Assessment. Assessment. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
All right.
All right.
Jim, Dan, are you all right if we?
My name's Kevin. I guess, the Food Services Committee is kind of really in charge of the lodge, right, when it comes to
The general manager of the lodge reports to the chair of the management committee.
Okay.
And so
Is that who's right here tonight, or? Okay, so you're the chair of the Food Services Committee?
No, he's the chair of the management committee. The Food Services Committee is advisory.
Okay.
It's advisory.
So, you were speaking earlier that, we'd probably end up looking at the financial situation to open back up the lodge and kind of be more money neutral or financial neutral, but we can all acknowledge, I think, that the lodge is probably always going to lose money. If you look at the situation, he had mentioned that, right, the subsidy, sorry, that he had mentioned that, it's going to be a process to get the lodge back up and running once we decide that, hey, we've got a good plan, enough plan to do it. Why would you not look at the bar the same way? That way it's kind of damage control as far as keeping some of those operations in place, keeping some of those people in place, and approach the situation that way.
You mean have the bar open?
Have the bar open, right, yeah. No food services, anything like that. Maybe bring some food trucks in on the weekends and use the dining room to eat. So just kind of proposing that.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Something worth looking into.
We'll look at it.
Right, okay. And that's something we could probably keep open right away then?
Enjoy it. It'll be open all Saturday night. We'll look at it.
But there could be a process for that moving forward. We're definitely shutting down.
We're gonna shut Sunday because that, for at least we'll talk about this later, but the shutdown, annual shutdown starts this Sunday for at least 1 week to do a deep cleaning.
We need to do 2
Right,
weeks.
so the employees that have been given notice,
That's correct.
that's their last day, and they're looking for new jobs, and that's, you know. So it's gonna be a rebuild situation no matter what at this point, I guess.
We have only two full-time employees in the works. Everybody else is.
Okay. Again, thank you guys for your time. I know what you do is tough, so thank you.
Thanks, thank you.
All right.
One quick.
Sure, we'll let you talk soon. Just come on.
You can't stop me.
I know
Sure, everybody, none of the lakes are closing down. Folks coming in April 25th, let's have something to look forward to. I just like to say, when we talk about the next vote, I would hesitate to put anything attached, any other kind of vote that has anything to do with any other kind of fee, like a restaurant fee. You just want to get that assessment passed, and people are going to say, you're just getting me for more and more and more. And we're going to hear more of that out of that minority vote. You might even put off that 66 2/3 to August and let that really simmer for a year. But I'd like to see it sooner, but that's something you guys are going to have to hash out. But I would hesitate any kind of vote, single line vote that has to do with any other kind of fee, because either roads or anything, we need to get that assessment fee.
Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Sue.
All right. Thanks, everybody. You're all welcome to stay and enjoy the management committee meeting. Of course you can go home because it's on video as well. So we brought
It's on video.